Ah,
Hey, everybody, welcome to Coffee Tech Talk. It's Tuesday night. Once again, I'm John Ferguson and with Marty Rowe. How's it going, Marty?
it's going great. Great.
Guess what we're going to learn about today? We're going to learn all about, well, I guess I asked you.
Well, I get online and I do a research thing on what we're talking about. It's going to be decaf
With who?
with Mike Strumpf
That's
from
right.
Swiss Water.
And I'm trying to select this. There it is, the slide.
There
I
you
love
go.
that picture. It's like very engaging. It's like, there you are. And director of coffee from Swiss Water Decaffeinated Coffee. We've known Mike for a long time. Not only because of the whole decaf thing, but also because of the barista competition world.
Sure.
We're going to kind of go in depth in that, but it's an exciting, it's going to be an exciting show. We're going to learn a lot. And I can't wait to talk because I wrote blogs about decaffeination process, and I'm like, I want to hear it from the source. So I was thinking a couple of weeks ago, I just called up Swiss Water, and I think David was there, and he's like, you should talk to Mike. And I'm just throwing out names. I don't know, Bob and Joe, and everybody just told me to talk to Mike. So
well, anyway. I'm kind of glad that we're doing a show on this because I got to say, when I first got into specialty coffee, and this might not have been true all over, but where we were at and where I was getting my coffee, and I'm one that I have to watch how much caffeine I drink. And I drink coffee for the flavor, believe it or not. So to get a good cup of decaf was tough. But I'd say in the last 10, 15 years, something like that, decaf coffees have just gone from here way up.
And, yeah, they have. I've really noticed a big shift about 5 years ago, maybe, when I was a little bit more responsible for having to buy larger volumes and quantities of it. Like it kind of, the spectrum of decaffeination and what's out there is pretty wide.
Now, I've got my theories. Sure. Yeah. I've got my theories on why it's improved, but I'm real excited to hear from Mike what really is going on behind the scenes.
Hey, you know what's going on behind the scenes? You know what's going on behind the scenes up here in Nebraska, Lincoln?
Snow.
Check this out. Boom. I just threw this this yardstick into my yard, right? And it actually it was about 12 and a half inches, and that's what they reported at the airport. 12 and a half inches of snow. And so like this, I'm like, okay, so where do I park my truck? And I got a four-wheel drive truck. I'm like, great, I can use it this one time, this one day out of the year. It's useful. And I'm just like, this is fun, right? Okay, sorry, everybody. But then the snow truck comes by my house, and I'm on a T intersection by a school, and I'm like, great, because they're going to come by because it's a school. I did my whole sidewalk across to the school end of my truck, and I did this path, and then the snowplow comes along and just like, boom, I've got like 3 feet of snow in the path that I just scooped out. So tomorrow when all the kids try to go to school, I'm like, hey, sorry, there's a mountain, you got to climb it. I gave it one go, but
we have that same kind of issue, or had that same kind of issue. But my wife Tootie, she sets a 2.2 liter air pot out by our mailbox for the guys that plow the snow.
Oh man, thank you. Thank them so much. Yeah, that's a lot of work.
And we don't have that problem anymore. They do not.
I went out there. I went out there and I was like, hey, how's it going? We love you. And he's just like, yeah, I'm just doing my job, man.
Yeah.
But no, I get lucky because I do live next to a school, and it's pretty bad out there. So did any snow in Kansas City? Nothing.
We got a little couple inches, I think.
Just a couple inches. That's nice.
Yeah.
Can you guys handle that okay?
Yeah, there were accidents this morning. Yeah. Here in Missouri, what happens if the weather changes, we forget how to drive.
And yeah. Living up in Minneapolis, this 13 inches is kind of not, I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, we get that almost every day. So,
when I was growing up, you didn't even call it a snow if it wasn't 6 inches deep.
Right. Well, hey, so I wanted to also talk about what we're, some news about what's coming on next week, because we, maybe sometimes might want to get people to watch the show next week. So next week we're going to talk about, Marty, what is this? Have you ever seen this before? And
not in person, but that's a big enough deal in the coffee industry that anybody that's into coffee knows about that. That's Roya or Rust.
Yep, coffee rust, and this was taken in Ecuador a couple of years ago, and kind of a bad photo. I call it like rustic photo, but that's basically what coffee rust looks like, and it's pretty bad. So and it's a topic I've been kind of like thinking about a lot lately because of the COVID, coronavirus, and then also most recently this is being shown up in Hawaii. So my coffee friends in Hawaii have called them up and said, hey, do you have anybody we can talk to about this and what the experience is like, not only coffee rust on the farm, but having tourists and people coming along and visiting a farm. So Werner from Makani Kai, I'm not very good with words, but he's going to join us next Tuesday to kind of just talk about, if you're going to go to Hawaii and if you're going to visit a coffee farm, what are the steps that you need to take, not only during the time of COVID, but also during the time of coffee rust. And there are precautions that need to be taken. And it's going to be a great episode on how to prepare yourself to visit a coffee farm, not only in Hawaii, but I mean anywhere. I mean, if anywhere in the world, there should be things that you need to take in consideration for proper etiquette and whatnot. So we're just going to kind of talk about that next week. It's going to be fun.
Now I gotta digress here a little bit. See his smile?
Yeah.
You know what that's saying? That's saying I'm in Hawaii and you're not.
That's saying not 13 inches of snow right now.
That's exactly it.
Right.
Like we have sunshine, John.
Yep. So next week we're also we're going to both talk about this book that we both read, Coffee is Not Forever by Stuart McCook, who has spent quite a bit of his time and career researching the history of coffee leaf rust, and it's a great book. We're going to talk about that, and then also a little bit about Stop the Spread of Germs and how so much of this correlates with coffee rust. Like if you just distance the plants out, if you wash your hands and put your boots on and be cautious about going from farm to farm and not carrying the transmission of the disease.
Okay.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But again, we have Mike Strumpf is still in the waiting room. Have we even said hi to Mike yet? Dietrich, have we said hi? Okay.
Wave at us, Mike.
Okay. Well, so I guess that's it. So.
Well, hang on. Before we can go any further,
I think he's like hanging out in the waiting room. Like, we didn't give him anything this time, not even a glass of water. I got really bad about that.
We're having a good time.
I know, but is he having? We got to know if Mike is having a good time.
I can't let you go any further though.
Okay.
We've done 20 some odd shows now, and out of those shows, I bet we could go back, and you've mentioned the clover. Now, I'm always one to be out on that cutting edge, but in the history of coffee equipment, there was this clover machine.
Yeah,
it kind of made a huge splash in the coffee world, and then it went away. And we've been chatting for several minutes now, and
what is that? Oh my gosh, you have one. I have. It's like sitting right in front. Like, where's the clover machine?
You haven't said one word.
I have. Well, I haven't. I didn't even look. I haven't seen it. So where did that come from? And why do you have it? And what are you going to do with it? And how much do you want to sell it for?
Of course, you know me.
Is it 110? Is it a 220? 220?
It's 110. It's 110.
Oh wow. Okay.
And it's everything I have is for sale.
Nice.
That's me. I don't know.
$50.
It was when those first come out, and not to eat up the whole story or tonight's show on this. We could do a whole show just on different types of extraction and the history of that. And this element within that would make a good. Well, but it used vacuum. It used a piston, and so it opened up cellular structure, unlike what most drip coffees do. So you're getting different flavor profiles because of that. It's a whole new thing. But when they first come out, they were 10 grand, and I don't know how many people that asked me about them. I said, just buy you a French press. It's $40 French press versus $10,000.
Take a couple zeros off of that.
But
at least like 3 of them. maybe.
But there was something about what ended up in the cup off that you couldn't get with a French press, and we can go into that.
Well, I think like sweetness and speed, sweet speed. But there's
Sure.
I don't know. You can
Whole
argue all day
nother
about
whole
that.
nother world.
They should have a clover extraction competition, next to the barista competition, and also the green coffee weighing competition that I want to start.
Yeah, maybe we can sponsor that.
Can you weigh out a pound of a decaffeinated coffee accurately, and also green coffee? And is there a weight difference? Let's ask Mike.
Hey,
Mike,
the one thing, let's bring him in, because the one thing I do know for a fact is if you grind coffee on a single grinder with just one grind setting, your grind will extract different between a regular and a decaf, and it will tend to overflow the basket. So let's just throw that at Mike and go, what's going on with that, Mike?
Hello, you've been talking about so many things.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? How's it going?
I'm finally ready to go. And now I'm going to take my own 10 minutes to respond to everything that you talked about in those 10 minutes.
I don't know. How many questions do we give him, Marty? And should we say like hello and how you do it? Like, where are you right now? I think you're in Vancouver, right?
Yes, Vancouver, British Columbia.
That's right. So you're not in the Switzerland.
No. So to answer the first question, we're located in British Columbia.
Right.
The process was originally created in Switzerland, and that's why it's called the Swiss water decaffeinated process.
I did my research on that one. So but I know that you may have, do you get that asked a lot, or is that a question, or is it kind of an obvious thing now, or, it's still a little confusing, right?
I think it is confusing, but people just don't ask. Maybe it's a question that people are embarrassed to ask about.
Oh, I'm not embarrassed to ask a lot of questions. I'll ask all the bad ones just for everybody. So I hope, anyway. So Marty, what was your question? What did you have?
Oh, that we know as people that are charged with setting up equipment for cafes, and we troubleshoot a lot, and of course we are very fond of our coffee ourselves. We know that decaf coffee grinds different than regular coffee, and we've heard a ton of different explanations on why it grinds different and it acts different, and then will tend to choke up your paper filter more if it's a decaf, all those things. So just on the properties of the bean, I guess itself is my question. What's going on there? What's the difference, and why is that a thing?
Yeah. So have you done like particle size analysis of decaf versus non-decaf?
We have, and what we've found is a wider range of particles, and it tends to lean that wider range tends to be a little heavy on the fines.
Yeah. So there's a couple things at play, and I'm really glad we're talking about this. I was thinking we would talk about it in terms of espresso, but it's the same principle. So decaffeination does everything that you're not supposed to do to coffee beans. And of course, we try and do it as nicely as possible, but you're exposing coffee to water and to air and to heat. And you hydrate your beans so they expand, and then they dry back down. And if you don't do that in a very controlled manner, you have the possibility of changing the cell structure. You're guaranteed to change it some, but the less gently you do, the more you're going to affect that cell structure. And then that means that your coffee is going to roast different, and then it's going to grind different.
Okay.
So in general, I like to think about roasting and grinding decaf as if it's like a lower density coffee, even though it's not necessarily lower density when you're roasting it. And then when you're grinding it, I think about it like darker roasted coffee, because darker roasted coffees tend to do the exact same thing with the particle distribution. They have that wide thing, and then they get fines that choke stuff up. And so you just have to do something to compensate for that. And it's not every single decaf that will make you have that wider particle distribution or finer grinds. It's partially how you roast the coffee. It's partially the coffee that you're buying. And then it's also partially the process and how gentle it was and how did it maintain that cell structure. But you're totally right. And so it's really obvious in espresso preparation how it chokes those things up. When you're doing a big batch brew, you kind of lose the visibility on what's actually happening. And that was one of the magical things about the clover. And I wanted to talk about the clover since we brought it up, because Vancouver, interestingly, was one of the cities that held on to the clover the longest out of anyone. It was partially because the North American parts distributor was located in Vancouver.
Sure.
But I think that it's been unmatched in terms of speed of service to provide a pretty good cup of coffee. And the service flow was incredible as well. Just the amount of time it took for the person to pay attention to it, it was really low, as opposed to a hand pour over where the person's taking a lot of time. And the feedback that you got in seconds as did your brew come out well? You know, it was a bit like reading tea leaves, but you could just tell by looking at that hamburger puck. Is it a nice hamburger? Is it a bad hamburger? And then you see right away. And so with decaf, it was really obvious that you had to do something different. Whereas if you're just making like a single cup, you can't tell. So I really liked that aspect of the clover. It was frustrating too, because unfortunately everybody else saw it. Everybody saw you had a bad puck.
Well, I'd love to kind of like, let's introduce to the audience of a lot of people who, you know, aren't familiar with the entire process of decaffeination, right? So like, I did a little bit of research and wrote a blog about, you know, how is coffee decaffeinated or whatever. And I learned that it's almost the 200th anniversary. I think it was created, what was it in, I don't know, 18 something or other, 200 years ago, the discovery of, you know, decaf was done. And this was done, you know, it started once this person named Ludwig accidentally soaked, apparently, this is legend. I love saying anything that's 200 years ago, it's like, yeah, he's, you know, it's a little hearsay, but or whatever. Accidentally soaked a freight load of raw green coffee in salty ocean water, which kind of removed the caffeine but retained some of the coffee flavor. This method was revised and replaced with other solvents, including, wow, I'm not a scientist kind of word, and more recently ethyl acetate, which remains a popular method to date or whatever. I don't know. There's you can go online and there's a lot of Googling that you can do and a lot of whatever sciencey stuff. And Mike, do you have a background in science? What's your background there?
Electrical engineering.
So you know a little bit about sciencey stuff, right? So like this engineering of decaf is definitely there's a reason why you're here, and you know there's some other folks that you're working with said, you know, you just got to get Mike on the call to kind of explain how this works. But today I want to talk about not only Swiss water and what's unique about that, but the kind of the history of like how coffee was decaffeinated. There's a slide that I put up here, Dietrich. I don't know if you've switched over to it or not yet, but for people out there that haven't roasted coffee before, aren't familiar with where coffee comes from and what it is, coffee is a seed of a fruit, of a cherry that comes off of a plant. And after all the fruit's removed, it, you know, it basically looks like regular green coffee in the top left-hand corner. It's kind of greenish. But decaf, when you open up a bag of this green coffee that's been decaffeinated, sometimes it looks more brown, like it's gone through a process. And people are like, oh, it looks like it's already roasted. With that process, that classic process that might have been around for like maybe 10, 15 years ago, like what Marty, you were saying, things kind of changed a bit. Back then, it seemed like even Swiss water, I don't know, maybe not, maybe it's just me, but everything was darker. Why does decaf coffee look different from regular coffee? I know it goes through a process, but just a high level kind of explanation there.
Yeah. So high level is you're processing coffee and you're doing potential damage to it. Each decaffeination plant kind of has like its hallmark look that you'll see both on green coffee and on the roasted coffee. These are pictures from the Swiss water process. Our hallmark look is that in green coffee, it looks greenish. And in roasted form, it kind of has like a matte appearance. Other plants, you can pick them out because they have a really shiny appearance, like they start oiling up before first crack, or the green coffee has like a mottled look. So based on the changes that everybody has, or like the differences between the processing methods, they just affect a little bit of a different type of color. And they could come from a lot of different things. So all decaffeination works in approximately the same way. We have just a couple steps. You have to hydrate your...
Oh, go ahead, go for it.
Sorry. You hydrate your beans because your beans are fully processed, fully dried down. It's just regular green coffee. And that's at say 10% moisture. But you hydrate it, you get your beans back up to about the moisture that they were sitting on the tree, at about 50% moisture. And you want to do this because it means that it's easier to gently remove the caffeine. So caffeine is water soluble. And so this process is just like brewing coffee. You need something to extract the caffeine out of the beans. It's pretty much done in a liquid form because the caffeine just brews out. So that's after you hydrate, you brew your caffeine out, and then you'll want to do something to remove the caffeine from that medium that you used. So you separate out your caffeine, then you have your extraction medium, and you just reuse it over and over again. You dry your beans down, and you have decaf.
I think we have a couple of slides and we're going to go a little bit more into detail so you have something to kind of work off of there. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you, like, there are other types of decaffeination processes that I've heard of. Yeah. And if you're looking at an offering sheet, you're going to see this MC and then also AE, I believe. Is that correct? Or is it sugarcane and then AE different? And then there's Swiss water, the water processing. What are the differences between those three major buckets? Like, what is MC, for example? What is
so methylene chloride, or is what we call it in North America. It's a chemical solvent that's used to separate out the caffeine from the bean. Okay. And there's regulations about the amount that can be left in the coffee. The FDA controls that sort of thing.
Is it safe to consume? Because a lot of people ask, like, is MC safe? Like, for your body, is it safe to consume?
Methylene chloride itself is not.
No, I mean, the decaf. Good point. Very literal. And that's a good thing. Do not drink MC.
No, please do not. As long as your residue levels are within what the government says is acceptable, you're going to be fine.
Right.
They have really tight regulations on that because they don't want to be responsible for anybody getting sick.
And so, what are the positive, what about MC that could change the way that the coffee tastes, or are there some byproducts from the process that may be, not advantageous to the environment? Or if you are going out there and you want to get an organic coffee, or you want to be more sustainable in your purchasing practices, what are the upsides and the downsides of MC, and does it matter?
Yeah, it definitely matters. So in the discussion about coloration of coffee, one of the big things that can affect color is the temperature of processing. Because if you're processing your coffee so high at temperature, you can be caramelizing sugars and starting what we do in the roasting process. And I would say the biggest advantage of methylene chloride is that the boiling point of methylene chloride is very low. So they're able to run this process at a low temperature, which means that you're going to be affecting the beans less in terms of temperature. And that's a nice advantage. Methylene chloride, you won't often see like really high-end traceable coffees that are processed that way, because in general, the minimum batch size from these decaffeinated is pretty big. So you'll see more just like generic coffees sold by the country of origin.
Right. And so, and then there's another, the next process, and we could spend probably 8 hours, oh my gosh, on each one of these processes. And I definitely, we have a lot more to talk about. We haven't even talked about your world barista judging, like sort of like, I wouldn't know where you go with that. But next up, sugarcane processing. It's a nice way of saying a different chemical structure, I think, in a sense. And it's AE. And what's that about? How would you explain that?
Yeah, so ethyl acetate is what it's called. And it's a really similar process. So with those chemical processes, you can either have indirect or direct, where indirect means that you won't have the chemical in contact with the beans, and then direct is you have it in contact. In general, the methylene chloride is an indirect process, and I would say in general, the ethyl acetate is more likely to be a direct process. Now, ethyl acetate, the reason why people will talk about it as sugarcane is that it's a naturally occurring compound in fruits and things that have sugar. So you can extract byproduct from a sugarcane and then chemically change that into ethyl acetate as a solvent. And then you can use that to decaffeinate your coffee.
And so that is more of a natural chemical, or versus the MC, which is more synthetic in a sense.
Yes.
To put it very layman's terms that I could talk about.
It's a good way to describe it.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that's why, and the sugarcane process sounds better than ethyl acetate, something I can't pronounce properly. But I've also cupped those coffees from that process, and I was impressed by them. And I don't know why. Why was I impressed by the sugarcane process? Is it marketing, or is it actually because they do smaller batches with better coffee? And then there's Swiss water, of course, too, which is like
John.
Also,
it was the color of the bags.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
I think it was more of the texture and the feel.
It's all of that.
Right.
It's for sure all of that. So one of the aspects of that processing method, especially the plant down in Colombia that a lot of people are selling coffee from, it puts on this fruity flavor, and it's like an estery fruit.
Right.
I think it's like banana-like. Some people say it's cherry-like, but it adds something to the coffee. So that's one aspect of it.
I see.
Another aspect is that they have a small batch size. So people are putting high-end traceable coffees through that plant. And, that's what's really changed in decaf recently. You're talking about what changed 10 years ago, 5 years ago, right, is that people are paying more attention to what the coffee is that goes in. And the more and more you taste decafs, the biggest thing that's the impediment to flavor and quality is the green coffee going into it. Right. If you take a really fresh, high quality green coffee, a lot of different decaffeination plants can produce a nice decaf out of that. But not everybody's doing it. And so those ethyl acetate coffees, people are doing that. And then we try and do that as well, because a small batch size in decaf land is like 50 bags. Mm-hmm. But unless you're a pretty good size roaster, you aren't even going through 50 bags of decaf in a year. You're certainly not taking on your own full custom run. So what we do as a decaffeinator is do that run ourselves and then try and find people who are buying 1 or 2 bags and then sell it out. Because otherwise you don't have access to those types of coffees. But until you bulk together buyers, you're never going to increase the quality or the traceability.
Well, let's talk about Swiss water process. You sent me this presentation. I kind of adapted it. I put a nice blue in the background, a little, kind of purple blue. I don't know what it is, but and it is kind of like a brief history, real quick, of the Swiss water process. I read somewhere 1930 something. Has it been around that long, or did I misread that, or is it quite a long time ago?
So that was a different decaffeination process that started back in the 30s.
Well, then educate me today, please.
there was like theoretically some kind of small test, but it wasn't actualized.
I see. Okay.
As a method.
So then this was pioneered in Switzerland. It's publicly traded, in 60 different countries, located in Vancouver, and 2 independently operated production lines. What does that mean?
That's funny marketing. Inside of our plant, we have 2 production lines. That's what it means.
Excellent. Easy peasy. Next slide. Let's talk about the decaf industry, right? This is a good one. I was kind of impressed with, about the statistics that say that, 42% of the coffee drinkers seek out decaf. So we're talking like 4 out of 10 people are kind of like interested in decaf. So one thing that I was looking at Instagram, I was going to do some posts about decaf, and I wanted to use the little logos, or what do they call that? Stickers, right? And there was, all they said was death to decaf, and like, you want to hear a joke? Decaf. And it's all super negative. I'm like, oh my gosh, please just let people enjoy what they want to enjoy and not make people feel bad, or so like. And here it is, like almost 50% of the younger generation than millennials and Gen Z consume decaf. And I'm starting to see it, if I would challenge people to get on a cupping table with me and possibly a couple other people, and put a lot of coffees up there and just say, like, before you go out and say death to decaf and everything. I know, well, actually, maybe if it's a delivery mechanism, well, then yeah, sure. I guess if you need caffeine for that. But as far as flavor goes, I think that, like, you're right, Marty. And like last 10 years, I think there's been a lot of change in the flavor aspect. So
There has been.
How do you deal with that, Mike? Like, with everybody's like, death to decaf. We hate decaf. Blah, like.
No, it's, I like it because
right?
there's not that much pressure, if everybody thinks it's a joke, then it's like, you don't have to take it too seriously.
Right.
And also, when you convince people otherwise, it's really satisfying.
It is fun, isn't it?
A few years back, we did these pop-up cafes where all we served was decaf. And we didn't tell people it was decaf. We just opened it up, and it was like come in and have a coffee experience, like taste coffee from different origins with different different brewing methods and different processing methods. And then, at the end, you find out there's no caffeine in the coffee, and like, nobody was complaining.
Well, did you give them the gift when they left, a 5-hour energy drink, saying, like, here's your caffeine. You can just shoot that. You don't have to spend like hours drinking coffee. You can just shoot
So much of it is, it's the way that it's presented. And if you're presenting it in a manner that people are used to, they're used to the idea that coffee picks them up.
Right.
Like, the caffeine doesn't get into your system and actually take effect on you for quite a while. But everybody, when they have the ritual of taking the cup of coffee, smelling it, whatever it is, they're just invigorated. They think, oh, it's my morning cup. And so, like Marty said, decaf can let you drink more cups of coffee throughout the day if you want that flavor without making you jittery. And I'm the same way. I can't drink that much caffeine because it just gets to me. And so one of the things that's really driven the increased consumption of decaf with younger people is sitting in cafes and using cafes as a workspace. If you're supposed to be buying coffee all day long, not that many people can tolerate that many cups of fully caffeinated coffee. So decaf became this great thing. And it's another reason why the quality of decaf has increased. Because when you had someone who was just drinking decaf, the quality didn't have to be comparable to something else. But when you have people drinking decaffeinated coffee and caffeinated coffee, they have to be on par, or else they're going to go somewhere else to get a better cup of decaf.
Hey, I just thought of a new branding strategy for a cafe, right? Instead of calling it decaf coffee, say, this is coffee without any caffeine in it.
Yeah, we use that one, coffee without caffeine.
Coffee without caffeine, and it's just kind of like a rebrand of like the word, because it had such negative connotation. But
yes.
I'm just trying to argue here. I don't know. People like caffeine, whatever. But this is great. So Swiss Water is the only decaffeination company focused exclusively on a chemical solvent-free process. We talked a lot about chemicals. So there's no chemicals here except for water. Is that right? And water's not a chemical. It's, I don't know, comes from the world.
The wording is complicated because water is most definitely a solvent.
But it's chemical free, right? Maybe.
Yes.
I mean, there might be some minerals in there. Is it distilled or is it?
No, but the water in Vancouver is very, very clean. When we were getting our lab as a certified SCA campus, our water was too low in solids. So we had to remineralize.
Well, that's awesome.
We're like below 20 TDS coming out of the tap.
And so, and then also this slide here shows a pretty good, it's talking about your green coffee and maintaining organic certifications. And is that not possible with several other types of decaffeination processes?
Yeah. So if you use one of the chemical solvents, those are not allowed as manufacturing aids or ingredients by the organic standards. So if you have an organic coffee going in, it's not an organic decaf going out. But with the Swiss water process, based on the way that we do it, we're able to maintain those certifications.
I have a little technical question. I just got to pop in there. The green coffee that goes in, Swiss water coffee, after the process comes out, how much weight loss is there, or is there a weight gain?
No, there's not a weight gain. So caffeine is approximately 1.25% of Arabica coffee. Robusta is about twice as much, so you're talking 2.5. You're guaranteed to have that much weight loss. You're gonna have more weight loss than that though, because every decaffeinator will clean up their coffee before they decaffeinate it. So we go through 3 cleanings beforehand. We do dust removal, we do screen sorting to remove anything that's big or too small, and then we polish. And so this is an interesting thing as a roaster that you'll notice about decaffeinated coffee. You'll never see silver skin on there.
Right.
Because what'll happen, and when you're hydrating the beans in the process, the silver skin would just float off and it would gunk up your system, and that's bad for business. So everybody polishes off that silver skin, and you can tell the difference between decaffeinated green coffee and non-decaf by looking
it's super clean. There's never any chat. Like it always roasts clean.
No, and it's it's really common for people to have roaster fires with decaf because they get too confident. They're like, there's no chaff in here. But if you have a slightly dirty chaff can and you get a little ember in there, and so I've heard of a number of roaster fires because people just think they don't have to pay attention to it.
Well, I guess part of the question I had there is like, because it's a water process, right? You think about moisture content, and like if you put it in at 10% green coffee, 10% moisture content in, is your aim to get 10% moisture content decaf out? And that's why there's no difference in the weight loss, or what?
No, so it's interesting, and the big thing that's different about quality control in decaf versus roasted coffee is the moisture content. When you're roasting coffee, your end product's at like 4%, 3% moisture, and it's very, very stable. Nobody's worrying about roasted coffee molding. But decaffeinated coffee, if you don't dry it properly, that's your big risk, is your coffee could actually go bad. And so we have a standard that we ship out for moisture content that is completely unrelated to what the moisture content was coming in. Coffee could be 9% or it could be 12% coming in, doesn't matter. We ship it out at the same moisture content because that's the moisture content that we know will be stable and won't start to mold.
What is that percentage?
It's about 10%.
Okay.
And so another interesting thing about decaffeinators is some of them will seal the coffee. After it's dried down, people can put on a wax coating. And so that's why some of the processes will have a really shiny look. That does a couple things. It can lock in moisture, but if the moisture isn't set properly, then you can have a problem.
So I have the next slide, Marty, if you want to throw in anything here, but this is the process right here. This is where we get, we dive a little bit deeper and maybe catch up with people who might not be, following what we're saying, but like, and I'm kind of halfway there. But so step number 1, we've got the green coffee. This is where it starts. You bring in the green coffee, and could you explain what's going on? Just 1 through 6, kind of quick here.
Yeah, definitely. So after the cleaning, after it's polished and ready to go, it needs to be hydrated. So we soak the beans and they expand, they get full of water. And then the decaffeination process starts to happen. And it's in like a column. If you come on a tour, whenever we're allowed to have people visiting again, it's like going on a brewery tour. So it's a big tank like you would be brewing in. So you don't get to see anything happening, but it's happening at an elevated temperature because like brewing, the hotter it is, the more efficient it is. You don't want to go too hot because then you start to degrade your coffee. But you start running this solvent across the beans. We call it green coffee extract, and it's water saturated with the soluble solids that make up the flavor of coffee. Now, if you have that soluble solid mixture that is lacking caffeine, when you put in fresh coffee, the caffeine will be motivated to brew out, and the rest of the soluble solids are motivated to stay in the bean. So the whole process is about equilibrium and brewing. So we put our beans in, we run that extract across the bed of coffee, caffeine brews out, and you just do it for enough time until the caffeine is at a low enough content in the beans to be sold as decaf.
And so then I think that we're at step 4, or like when it's when the coffee is 99.9% caffeine free, it is sent to the dryer and then bagged and shipped, right?
Yeah, and I like to gloss over the dryer part because it's not cool to talk about, but it's a mechanical drying process. And my personal take on it, my take on coffee in general is once it's picked from the tree, it's not going to get any better. You're just trying to maintain the quality.
Right.
And that's my outlook on the drying as well. You just want to make sure you're drying it evenly and in a controlled manner so that you have even moisture from the outside of the bean to the inside of the bean. And then I cannot gloss over step number 5, because really what makes us different from other decaffeinators is this step. So other decaffeinators can do the first 4 steps the same way that we do, but we're the only ones using this carbon technology. And so this is what allows us to not use any chemical solvents to extract the caffeine. So it's carbon made specifically for Swiss water to our specifications. And it's like a physical process where the carbon can filter out anything depending on pore size and geometry of the carbon. So we have carbon that is the right pore size and shape to capture caffeine, but not the other soluble solids. So we run that extract, which is full of soluble solids, across carbon, like a big Brita filter.
Right.
And then the caffeine gets trapped in the carbon, the rest of the soluble solids stay in, and the whole thing just goes over and over.
We need to take a virtual tour of this facility, this brewery. Like you just need to like show the camera of the big silo doing nothing, and then just I don't know why. Maybe that would not be. I don't know if time to be there. But,
so Mike, that brings me to basically 2 questions that I had going into this, and this is just a verify if I've got this right. You've got the caffeine filled beans, and the first step that's not actually in this is that it gets soaked in water that has nothing in it. And it extracts caffeine along with a bunch of other flavor compounds and a bunch of stuff out of the coffee beans.
No, so not exactly.
Well, work with me here. All right. So
bring it back down. Bring it back down.
So that sets up that liquid that has extracted that, and you throw away those beans. Now I'm adding to this, where you throw away those beans.
Yeah.
But that gives you a liquid that then you can extract out of all of those compounds that it took. You can pick out the caffeine. So then when it comes back around and in your process, and this is where I think I'll catch up with you, is that now you're putting fresh coffee in a water that already has a lot of the stuff that it already took out of the beans, and it's going to leave that in the beans. And it's only going to take out what you took out of that water through the decaffeinating process.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool that you can hand pick by doing that what it pulls out of that next batch of beans, or that continued, not the next million batches of beans.
Marty, is that called flavor charged water?
I guess it would be.
Call it flavor charged?
The water says I'm already charged with flavor. I'm not going to pull the flavor. The flavor can stay in the beans, so you guys can drink that. I'm going to pull the caffeine out.
Like you have been charged with water Flavor. I'm sorry. You've been charged with flavor. That was a bad one. Okay, Mike, take it
Oh,
away.
No,
so is that right?
You're exactly right. Yeah, so that step that isn't pictured, the creation of the GCE, or
Okay.
back in the olden terms of marketing from Swiss Water, it was flavor charged water.
Oh,
Now
good.
we changed the marketing to green coffee extract.
Good job, John.
Yeah,
Thank you. I've been around for a while. I haven't caught up yet.
that's the step 0.
Now, is that done just like I explained with coffee?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, you just need a bunch of coffee, and then you take the soluble solids out of it.
All right. Well,
And
we got.
That's awesome. Hey, I have one more question.
I've got another
And
question.
it's a real quick one.
We got a wait line of questions
All
going
right,
on. Here.
so you're, and I see that the hands up, Dietrich. Let me ask
Dietrich's
this real quick.
He's like, I gotta go.
So you guys filter out the caffeine, and unlike, I'm assuming, unlike many decaffeinating companies, you filter that out. Do you burn that? What happens to that? Because it sounds like you don't sell that. You don't monetize that caffeine that's being extracted. Am I correct on that?
You got it exactly. You should just give the tours at the plant. So
I picked it up. I just need off what you said. I just wanted to verify that.
Yeah, because the carbon is worth more than caffeine. And so we want to be able to reuse that carbon over and over again as many times as we can. So we put it through a reactivation furnace, which burns out everything from the pores of the carbon, resets the carbon so that it can be reused again. So we don't capture the caffeine, we don't resell it. It just goes out the top of the roof.
Okay.
Dietrich.
Yeah, so I guess to pop onto Marty's thing, I mean, at that point, is it caffeinated water? Like, is it drinkable?
You don't want to drink it. It won't hurt you.
Right.
But it's not really water. It's green. It's a living substance. It's a food product. It's full of sugars. It's full of proteins. And so you can taste it. It isn't delicious.
So there's a reason why we roast coffee. That's what I'm asking. It has been tasted.
Yeah, but like brewing unroasted coffee isn't tasty.
No, it is not. No, I mean, even like 4 minutes into the roast, not quite first crack. It's just probably amplified. I don't know of this rawness. Well, so we've got this other slide that you sent to me, just to kind of. We're like 10 more minutes. I mean, we could talk for 2 more hours, but
let's do.
We'll get you going. So what's this about? What's this green coffee quality is the foundation of decaf? So we're talking about all the processes, but you got to start with something good, right?
Yes, if you don't start with good coffee, you cannot end with good decaf. And so this is just a little bit of information about the coffees that we offer. As I was saying before, unless you're a very large roaster, you're not doing custom runs for yourself. So it's a lot of trust for a roaster to put into this decaffeination company, because you have to give up your control over buying coffee and selecting lots and let me do it for you. And so we have a bunch of different offerings depending on what type of quality people want, depending on what kind of flavors they want, what kind of traceability options they want. And so this is just saying, we buy coffee, we can sell coffee, we buy coffee with many different certifications.
Could you give me an example of what highly traceable coffee is? Like, what does that mean for someone out there that's like, I really want to know where my coffee comes from, and that's an important attribute to my organization or whatever, my business. What kind of coffee is highly traceable? Could you give me an example?
For me, highly traceable coffee is down to a single farmer.
And you do work with different farmers like that are they producing like 50 bags or a full container? Or all of the above? Yeah.
Buying a single farmer lot of 50 bags or more of very high quality is a challenging thing. It's not like you can just go out and find that everywhere, but it's totally available.
Okay. So what's the smallest amount you like? Would you do 5 bags or
no? You hit it. 50 bags is right about the minimum.
50 bags is the minimum. So even if it was a small farmer, maybe they have a neighbor and they could have a small community lot, but it's not a community lot, because I've heard the community just means whatever. But You know, right? I don't know. Am I right, Mike? I
You
don't know.
you exactly typified like why it's hard to give up control as a buyer, right?
Right.
And so we sometimes will have single farmer lots. Sometimes it's blends from a neighborhood or a community. Sometimes it's from a cooperative. It all depends, you know, what's available, what projects we have going.
Yeah.
And so those are the highly traceable ones.
Well, so like, and you know, another thing I want to talk about, well, that you sent this too, is some of the value for your customers, brand recognition, whatnot. I've seen some really cool neon Swiss water lights. I think one of them was in St. Louis, maybe, if my mind was right. Where did I see a Swiss water neon
The
sign?
roastery in Kansas City had a really cool
They have one
neon
too?
Swiss. Yeah.
You know, I don't have one yet. If you want to send me one for free, I'll take it. Maybe.
No, we don't
Just
have
kidding.
any more. They apparently shipping neon around the country is
not a good thing to do.
No.
It's kind of a, well, you know, whatever. It's probably breakable. So this is cool. So you have a pretty well, a well recognized brand, Swiss Water Process. Yeah, so there's a couple customers there, and this looks kind of neat. Is this a roaster or is this a construction piece of something? What is this?
Yeah, it's a palletizing robot. It's really cool. So okay. after the coffee's bagged up, it goes onto this, and you're looking at picker fingers that pick up the bags, that it doesn't pierce it, just lifts up the bag, and then it rotates it and puts it on pallets in different pallet configurations, and that way nobody's lifting the bags all day long.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I've done that manually for a very long time, and it's a terrible job, and it's back-breaking work, and I mean that literal. This is cool. I've seen
that is cool. John, if you come to Kansas City, I'll show you one.
Yeah,
there's one in Kansas City.
And do they also like have this so it just loads it onto the pallet, and the pallet then you put it on the pallet jack and get into the truck, right? Hey, Dietrich, what do you got?
Yeah, we've got a question that actually got messaged to me from a tea drinker fan. You know, is the Swiss water process, is that used in decaffeinating teas as well?
Ooh, good question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's a good question, especially up here in Vancouver. A lot of people drink tea up here. But no, our process doesn't work with it. And the main method of decaffeinating tea is with carbon dioxide, which is a method for decaffeinating coffee as well. The real problem is for us, you know, it's a different set of soluble solids in coffee and tea. So we would have to have a completely different process to do that.
I see. Oh, we didn't talk about that process. What does that involve? I guess the decaffeination. You said it was a CO2.
Oh yeah. So carbon dioxide, like water, is a fantastic solvent. And if you're a brilliant scientist, by controlling temperature and pressure, you can put carbon dioxide into a method that's solvent for different things. So people were able to figure out how to get carbon dioxide in the right form to become a solvent that's very specific to caffeine. And then you put that in contact with your coffee, it extracts your caffeine out of it. You then change the phase of your carbon dioxide, you separate out your caffeine, do it over and over, you got your decaf.
Is that an expensive process to do and safe, or is it use any sort of like synthetic solvents, or is this?
No, it's in addition to water processing, carbon dioxide can be certified organic.
I see.
So there's no outside solvents used.
But it is expensive, right? Have I heard that right? Or is it like MC? MC is probably the most affordable process, correct?
Yeah, it's expensive in the sense that nobody's processing carbon dioxide coffee in North America.
I see.
So when you're buying that, you're buying coffee from a plant probably in Germany.
That's right.
And then you're paying for extra handling and so on and so forth.
I've researched some of that, where the logistics of like, okay, we'll take some coffee from Peru and get it, do the carbon dioxide, but you got to send it to Berlin or wherever, Hamburg, and then have it then sent to Houston, and then go up, to the roaster. And after all that's said and done, it does become a rather expensive process. And so with sugarcane process, like you said, it was in Colombia, but that's not necessarily available in anywhere else in the world, is it? I mean, so that's another expensive and limited process to a specific country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so I'm assuming the CO2 process is done under high pressure.
So there's both supercritical and critical processes depending on which plant is doing it.
Okay.
But this is to the initial thing we were talking about. If you have it under too much pressure, you are very likely to change the cell structure.
I could see that, yeah. And it would be an expensive process to do. The equipment to do that at mass would be pretty heavy equipment.
Well, we got a couple more slides in about 5 more minutes. Dietrich, what do you got?
Yeah, we just have another question messaged in. How long does the entire Swiss water process take from the moment you throw that caffeinated bean in to the moment that you're getting it out?
Call it a day and a half. It's not too fast. It's not too slow. Try and do it gentle.
So you've got those machines running then pretty much. Is it like a 24/7 process with you guys then?
Yeah, it's a big living system. It likes to just run. That's when it's happy.
Well, hey, I've got a couple more questions before I hand it over to Marty to ask you the most important questions. First, I have just like one quick slide. It's the last one that you have. It obviously, brand promotion, marketing support, and education and value add. I think that you are probably one of the biggest value adds to Swiss Water is having your team that you have. I mean, you're flush with talent up there in Vancouver, and it doesn't come easy to get that kind of group together. So your background, I guess, there's a lot to be said there. Before we get there, because Marty's going to take us to the personal aspect of every show. He's like, we're going to get to know our guest at the end of the show, not at the beginning. I don't know why. I just get excited about it. Let's hear the technical stuff first, and then people come later. But I did put this out there, a question. What are some things to consider when roasting Swiss water decaf? What's like your word of advice to people out there, like kind of new to the Swiss water process, or even just decaf? When they open up the bag, they're like, uh-oh, what do I do with this?
If you're new to roasting decaf and you have a bean probe, go by your bean probe. The color is confusing and it really throws people off. But the bean's the bean, and you're going to follow a similar curve. So that initial slide that you had up with the color change as the roast progress went through, there we go.
Yep.
So what we see there is on the left of each column is the non-decaf, on the right is the decaf. And so they follow a similar progression of getting darker, but there's like a phase shift. And it really throws people off. And if you have multiple decaf processes in your plant, in your roastery, that phase shift is going to be different for each coffee, and it can be really challenging. So if you're just getting going with decaffeinated coffee roasting, pay attention to the temperature primarily.
So there's a couple things there. First crack, is it louder or is it softer? Can you even hear it? Is it sometimes even recognizable? That's a challenge that I've come across, is like, did I hear that? Or
yeah,
it's been a while since I roasted. Yeah,
it is a little bit softer. Right. You can definitely hear it.
Yeah, and also the finished product, for example, when it gets to, let's say on this chart, 9.5 minutes, regular 9.5 minutes here is where's the first crack on this chart? Do you think about 8 minutes, or maybe 9.5, something like that? I don't know, but anyway, it is significantly darker, and people would be like, "Oh, you burnt the decaf." It's just, but it's naturally just darker. It's sort of like, I would compare it to like a honey process, because it has some of that sticky, residue on the outside of the bean, and when you roast it, it kind of comes out a little bit darker. Is that kind of this? What's going on with why does decaf look darker after it's roasted?
There's just a little bit of a discoloration, and it is different from plant to plant. It's going to look a little bit different coming from each place. And so ours, you can see in the very first slide, it's just a little bit of a darker hue. And so the entire time it's that darker hue.
But even then, there's even more of a contrast around the 10-minute, right? Then it's like at that 0 hour here, we've got like green and green. but over here it's kind of like brown and darker brown. Anyway.
Yeah. And
it's nice,
so
but it tastes
what
good.
what I try and pay attention to in those end stages is like the texture more than the color.
Right. Well, hey, so Marty, you have some questions about memorable, favorite, who are you, what's your last name,
Well, I
challenging
don't.
aspects of the job.
I think
And,
how we got
go.
started. I think how. No, I don't. I won't inundate you with a ton of questions like that. But how we got started on this is we've had some guests that throughout the whole thing, our show, they talked their job and they talked technical, and did a great job. But there's a whole lot more to people than the technology that we could read out of a textbook. And so I just wanted to give them an opportunity to share, a memorable story, something positive that has come into their story list.
And it doesn't have to be about decaf, right?
No, it doesn't have to be about decaf.
I mean, it can be like
we kind of
pre-decaf
like
days.
we kind of like for it to be coffee related in the coffee world and things like that. But
if you have to be,
if you've got a little story or something that you'd like to share, a positive attribute of being in the coffee world,
most memorable moment. Yeah. What was it? What do you got?
And I really like this. I know it might seem odd to have the introduction to the person afterward, right. But I look up recipes online sometimes, and I don't like having to scroll through like the story of the person and their grandparent and how they got there and like what they did that day. Like, just give me what goes into it. And so,
we're gonna actually clip all of this and put it to the front. And then we're gonna have all the decaf follow. So it's gonna be kind of a messed up thing, but we'll get there. So like how long have you been in coffee, I guess? And like what was your best experience? Yeah.
Technical things first, then the story.
Right.
So one of my favorite stories about coffee is with Mr. Marty Rowe.
Oh no.
Score.
So before I was working at Swiss Water, I was living in Colorado, and I was helping plan these barista competitions, the Mountain Regional Barista Competition. And this story might actually connect the two of you and me, because it's that old.
And could almost maybe even connect Dietrich, because that's where he competed. So go ahead.
What year was that?
Dietrich,
it was that would have been 20. Was it 09 or 10 or something like that?
2010ish.
09 maybe. Yeah, so I don't remember very well.
There's a couple of years, there.
I was 16, so
yeah,
I guess it was 11 years ago.
2011.
Yeah, 11 years ago. So 2010.
Hey, back in the day.
Yeah, this one was either 2007 or 8. It's tough to remember, but we were organizing this competition, and you have to have these really specific tables. And the tables are the most complicated thing of running this competition. You can do everything else, no problem. But getting these tables to the exact specifications that can hold espresso machines and be sturdy and all that kind of stuff, it's difficult. And so I had to find out, where can I get these tables? And I got tipped off to Marty and Tootie. And so I was just some person, they didn't know me, they didn't know anything about me. And they said, yeah, we have these tables, we have them built, we're gonna send them to you. And for it to be the most difficult thing to source in the competition, it was like unlocking the ability to run it, and it was just such a nice, kind, trusting act. And then one of the tables got damaged in shipment, and they were still nice and still helpful. It was, one of the heartwarming things about people in coffee is, and I've always appreciated it. And I don't know if I've ever told you.
Well, hey, I appreciate that. That's a great story, and I absolutely do remember that. And I felt your pain, because the 6 years that competition was in Kansas City, we used those tables, and we built those. We threw those together at the last minute because we had that exact same challenge that you guys were having. they have these specs on the height and the width and all that, and they're all different. And nobody makes a table like that. So we threw them together at the last minute so we could have that, and then we used them, subsequently for those years. And so, yeah, to make them available, that was the answer. That was.
And so, what are you doing in a barista competition, Mike? What what about this World Barista thing? What is this about? Marty brought it up. And
hey, he's a
what
pretty
Mike,
wide range of talents this guy's got.
So you've judged some competitions. When did you start doing that? And what's your most recent competition that you judged?
I started judging after I stopped competing. So I think the first year that I started judging was 2006.
No, wait a second. You competed.
Yeah.
Before you judged. Okay. How long were you competing for? Was it
just
a couple of years?
2 years.
Wow. And what, like in 2004, 5?
Yeah.
I missed that. I missed that.
Or maybe it was 5 and 6. The years they were a long time ago.
Okay. And since then you've been judging, right?
Yes. And the most recent competition that I judged, it's coming up on a year ago. We ran our Canadian National Barista Championship last March, and haven't judged one since. Because right now, for us, it's not the right time to be doing that.
Well, I think there's a pandemic or something going on. I don't know. I've heard that kind of delayed some things, but
yeah.
It's kind of
but between 2006 and last March, I was probably judging 5-6 competitions a year.
So what's Marty, did you ask what the most challenging?
Oh, I have on some of them. Mike, has there been an exceptionally challenging event or moment or
oh yeah, so many. One of the things
it hasn't been all that bad.
like not having the right size tables.
Well, one of the things that keeps me involved in these competitions, and I change my role frequently, starting with competing and then judging and then the different aspects of judging. And I'm rarely out on the floor anymore. I'm more of just like a help train people, help oversee things, make sure that stuff functions. And no matter what I do, there's always things to learn. And it's always a challenge. And getting through the challenge with friends brings you together, and you have that moment where, you got through it. One of the funny challenges I remember, I think it was in Kansas City one year, Robin Seitz was competing, and we were in this big hall. Everybody was there, and somebody leaned up against the light switch, and all the lights in the building went off right in the middle of his competition. And it didn't turn off the power, and he knew exactly what he was doing. So he just kept going.
Yeah.
And, it's a testament to Robin. But it was just amazing. Then we figured out somebody was leaning on the light switch, turned it back on.
You got to get a couple extra points. It's like, he did it blindfolded. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, those Simonellis had those LEDs on them, though, right?
This was before that time.
Before lights on an espresso machine.
Yeah, that was at the Boulevard Brewing Company upstairs there. And I remember that. I had forgotten about that. I think that might have been the exact same year, if we're telling some quick stories, that Aaron Duckworth actually tasted in competition one of his shots that was supposed to go to a judge, just out of habit. He'd been practicing and tasting his shots and stuff. And I think it was at that same competition that he tasted it and then realized what he had done and said, "We're doing pretty good. That's exactly what it's supposed to taste like. Now let me get started with yours."
I've got a question then. Not to wrap it around or wrap it up, but can you use decaffeinated coffee in competition?
Good question.
Yeah. So there's rules in the competitions about what you can do to coffee, because they're supposed to be presenting coffee. but you are allowed to use decaffeinated coffee. And actually in the last Canadian Championships, I helped out with a test batch of decaf geisha.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
50 bags?
No, so we have a test method.
I'll take some of that.
It's like that much coffee.
I see. Okay.
So we did a bunch of them, and then it was roasted on an ikawa, right? And so,
All right.
but it was like it was a natural process geisha from La Palma El Tucan, and it was presented as kind of a future thing that can happen in coffee. Is like the future of coffee is flavor. It's not just a caffeine mechanism.
Wow.
And so yeah, it's hard to get your hands on those coffees that people would consider special enough to bring to a competition, but it's not impossible.
That you just named off like one of the best coffees I've ever tasted in my life. So to have that, presented in a decaffeination form, I would be very curious. I'd almost pay more just to experience that. I'd give you $20 for a cup of that coffee. Seriously, I probably would. I mean, that would be an impressive.
What was the cost of something like that, like that process? Because like, I guess when you're competing, I mean, like he was probably saying like, I want these beans decaffeinated if possible. So what was that price? Like, were you guys just experimenting with it or what?
All we were doing was taking the caffeine out. I didn't want to know how much it cost.
Right. It doesn't.
We had some.
It doesn't matter.
Did you get a chance to taste it, Mike?
Yes. Yeah, and there was also some Cedra variety as well, which was super cool because I never got to taste the Cedra variety, and certainly not as decaf.
Right.
Yeah, and they were still compelling, interesting coffees, and it drove home for me that if you have really high quality coffee going in, you can make a really interesting decaf.
Well, hey, Mike, if you have any of that left over, go ahead and send it to coffeetechcentral@gmail.com and just address it to John Ferguson. I'll get you my address later. So thank you for being on the show and bringing us some El Tucane coffee from Colombia, natural geisha, decaffeination process. Thank you so much. My name is John Ferguson, and every week we do this, and we're so glad to have you on the show this week. Thanks for coming. How can we get in touch with you? And then Marty, how can we get in touch with you too? So Mike, I guess we'll get you first. Email address or phone number or whatever you want to give out. Instagram.
Yeah, if you want to find me for work, my email address is mstrumpf@swisswater.com.
Excellent.
I accept emails 24/7, but I only respond during business hours.
Excellent. Thank you. And Marty, how can we get in touch with you?
Marty Rowe, Kansas City, Workbench Coffee Labs, workbenchcoffeelabs.com. We can teach you or we can fix you, either one.
And we also entertain you once a week.
And we can do that too. Hey, not to stretch this out any further.
Well, let's go for it. Give it another 20 minutes.
We typically give the guest a chance to ask us a question if there's something that's been gnawing at them throughout the show here, and we didn't do that with Mike.
Well, I guess not. Hey, Mike, do you have any questions for us?
I've been so entertained. I have no questions. This has
excellent.
Been great. Thank you.
He let us off the hook.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, everybody, for joining us tonight with Mike Strumpf from Swiss Water Process. I learned a ton. As always, thank you so much for all that information and your time. Thank you. Good night, and see y'all later. Bye. Where are we at?
Bye.